For this lesson, we will explore the use of chromatic modulation. Like common chord modulation, chromatic modulation uses a chord to pivot from one key to another. Unlike common chord modulation that uses a chord that is in common between the two keys as a pivot, chromatic modulation uses a borrowed chord to pivot. From here on out, when we discuss borrowed chords, we will also include the Neapolitan. Therefore, the Neapolitan can be used within chromatic modulation as well. While common chord modulation is an effective method for moving between closely related keys, chromatic modulation allows for moving between distant keys. The basic setup for a common chord modulation will also work for a chromatic modulation. Here we have a diagram showing the establishment of the original key, the pivot chord, the dominant in the new key, and the establishment of the new key. The pivot chord will be a borrowed chord in one or both of the keys. Let's start in the key of C major. First, we will establish the key. Let's use 1, 2, 5, 7, and 1, or C, D minor, G7, and back to C. Now for the pivot, let's choose a typical borrowed chord. Let's use the minor 4. This is F minor. Next, we want to find a key for our modulation that has F minor as a diatonic or borrowed chord. The key can be major or minor. In a major key, F minor could be the 2 chord in E flat major, the 3 chord in D flat major, or the 6 chord in A flat major. In a minor key, F minor could be minor 1. Let's modulate to E flat major. We bracket the F minor chord to show that it is a minor 4 in C and a 2 in E flat. Next, we follow with the dominant in E flat. Let's use B flat 7. Then we will establish the key of E flat major. Let's use 1, 2, 5, 7, 1. This is a chromatic modulation because the pivot chord, F minor, is borrowed in one of the keys. Let's hear this progression. Now let's try a chromatic modulation that uses a diatonic chord in the first key that is borrowed in the second key. Let's keep this example in C with the same starting progression to establish the key. Next, let's choose a diatonic chord to C major and see if we can make it work as a borrowed chord in another key. Let's try E minor, the 3 chord. The common minor chords for borrowing when in a major key are minor 4 and minor 1. Let's try both. E minor could be a borrowed minor 1 in the key of E major. In that case, the analysis would look like this, with the bracket showing E minor as 3 in C and minor 1 in E major, followed by a B7, the dominant in E major, and the establishment of the key of E. Here is the sound of this progression. If E minor was used as a minor 4 in the new key, we could transition to the key of B major. E minor is 3 in C and minor 4 in B. We follow with F sharp dominant 7, the dominant in B, then establish the key of B. Here is the sound of this progression. So far, we have witnessed how a chord can be borrowed in the initial key to modulate to a new key, and how a chord can be borrowed in the second key to modulate. One other possibility is for a chord to be borrowed in both keys. Let's start this progression in the key of C minor. First, we will establish the key with minor 1, minor 4, 5, 7, and 1. Next, let's use a borrowed major 1 chord as a pivot. Let's have the chord become the Neapolitan in the key of B. We will follow with the dominant in B and establish that key. Here is the sound of this progression. Let's summarize. Chromatic modulation uses a borrowed chord to pivot between two keys. The Neapolitan chord is categorized as a borrowed chord. The pivot must be borrowed in one or both of the keys.